This developer didn't just walk onto my property. He brought a contract and a smug smile and told me my family's farm was obsolete. He thought he could buy 200 years of my family's life for the price of a mid-sized sedan. He didn't know I had the original 1840 deed, and it had one line in it that was about to turn his entire multi-million-dollar project into a legal nightmare. My name's not important yet. What matters is the land, 160 acres in the river bottom outside town, farmed by 6 generations of my family, since a sterling ancestor, back when the county was still mostly unbroken prairie, wrote his name on a deed and started clearing ground. I know how that sounds. Sterling. Same name as the man who showed up on my land that Tuesday morning in a truck that cost more than my last 2 tractors combined. Marcus Sterling wasn't family. He just liked the coincidence enough to mention it twice in the first 5 minutes, like it was supposed to buy him something. He didn't ask before he got out of his truck. He walked straight across my hayfield like it already belonged to him. Boots barely denting ground I'd spent 30 years keeping healthy, and handed me a folder before he'd even said good morning. Figured I'd save us both some time, he said. Fair offer. Better than fair. Honestly, given what this ground's actually worth, to anyone who isn't sentimental about it. The number inside that folder was an insult, dressed up in a leather binder, less than what I'd get parting the equipment out at auction, less than what the mineral rights alone were probably worth if I ever bothered to check. This farm's not for sale. He smiled the way men smile when they've heard that sentence 100 times, and it's never once meant anything. Everybody says that the first time. He looked out at my fields like he was already subdividing them in his head. This whole valley's obsolete, if we're honest. Farming here doesn't pencil out anymore. I'm offering you an exit before the county forces one on you. I told him to get off my land. He left, still smiling, and told me to keep the folder, in case you come to your senses. I didn't know yet that he'd already spent 8 months quietly buying up every parcel around mine. I didn't know my 160 acres sat directly in the middle of an assembly worth 11 figures to whoever finished it. I didn't know, yet, about the line in my own deed that Marcus Sterling's lawyers had somehow managed to miss. My grandmother kept everything. Every deed, every survey, every letter this farm had ever generated going back further than anyone alive could verify from memory alone. All of it in a fireproof box in a closet nobody had opened since her funeral. I went looking for the original 1840 deed the same night Marcus Sterling left his folder on my kitchen table, mostly out of spite, mostly just wanting to hold the paper that proved this land had been ours since before Montana was a territory instead of a state. It was written in the kind of formal looping hand nobody uses anymore, the ink gone the color of weak tea, and most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Names, boundaries, a description of the parcel measured out in rods and chains, the way land used to get measured before anyone trusted a satellite to do it. Then, near the bottom, one clause that stopped me cold. To have and to hold unto the said grantee his heirs and assigns, for so long as the same shall be used and maintained for agricultural purposes, and upon cessation of such use, the said premises shall revert in full to the grantor, his heirs and assigns, without further act or conveyance required. I read it 4 times before I understood what it actually meant. The land hadn't just been sold to my family in 1840. It had been sold conditionally, a working farm, forever, or it reverted automatically back to the original grantor's line, the moment it stopped being one. Not a lawsuit, not a negotiation, automatic, baked directly into the root of the title, 180-some years before anyone had ever heard the words conservation easement. Whoever wrote that deed in 1840 hadn't trusted a promise. They'd built a trap door into the paper itself. I called a land attorney the next morning, a woman named Diane Osei, who'd handled agricultural title disputes for 20 years and had never, she told me, actually seen a working reversionary clause survive intact this long. "If this is real," she said, reading it over 3 times the way I had, "and if it was never formally released by a prior owner, which happens constantly, people just sign a release and don't realize what they're giving up, then this land can never legally become anything other than a working farm, not under your ownership, not under anyone's. What happens if somebody builds on it anyway?" She looked up at me over her glasses. "Then the second the last shovel of dirt moves for a non-agricultural purpose, this parcel reverts, automatically, to whoever holds the original grantor's line today. No sale would survive that. No development loan would survive that. No bank in the country would touch financing on a project sitting on ground with an unreleased reversionary clause baked into 1840. Marcus Sterling had already spent 8 months and, I'd later learn, almost $4 million quietly assembling 900 acres around my farm. He had no idea the single most important acre in his entire project was the one he'd tried to buy for the price of a used sedan, and that buying it wouldn't have even saved him. He came back 11 days later, same smug walk, same folder. A slightly higher number inside it this time. The kind of increase meant to look generous, and actually just confirms how desperate you've gotten. I let him get all the way through his pitch before I set my own folder on the table next to his. "Before you say anything else," I said, "you should probably know what's actually in my deed." He read it, the way people read something they don't want to be true, twice. His jaw did something small and involuntary on the second pass. "This is—" He stopped, started again. "This can't be enforceable. This is 180 years old. Diane Osei says it is. Feel free to get a second opinion. I'd actually recommend it, given what your title insurer's about to tell you the moment they run this parcel. You knew this the whole time you were stringing me along? I found it 11 days ago. Same day you left this folder on my kitchen table." I slid his own contract back across to him. "You might want to check whether your title company already missed this on the other 840 acres you've been buying up around me. Because if this clause traces back through the original grantor's line, the way it looks like it does, you've got more than one problem out there." I watched something behind his eyes do the math in real time. 8 months, $4 million. A project that had looked, right up until that morning, like the easiest assembly of his career. He didn't threaten me. He didn't raise his voice. He just sat there for a long moment, looking at 180 years of somebody else's foresight, sitting on my kitchen table, undoing everything he'd built in 8 months, without me ever having to say the word no a second time. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Not a negotiation anymore. A real question. "I want my family's farm to still be a farm in another 200 years, I said. "That's not a number you can put in a folder." Here's the part that doesn't make for quite as satisfying a headline, but it's the true shape of how this actually ended. I didn't run Marcus Sterling out of the county. I didn't get some enormous settlement that let me retire to a beach somewhere. What I got was leverage I'd never had before. That deed surfaced, and I used it to do something my grandmother would have actually recognized as a win. Sterling's project depended on assembling a contiguous block of land, mine included, and my clause meant he legally couldn't develop through my parcel under any circumstance without triggering a reversion that would unravel his financing entirely. His lawyers confirmed it within a week. His lenders confirmed it within 2. So, instead of buying me out, he redesigned around me. An easier fight than fighting a 180-year-old trapdoor, once his own attorneys explained what losing would actually look like. My 160 acres stayed exactly what they'd always been, a working farm, right in the middle of what became, eventually, a development that had to bend itself around one stubborn rectangle of hayfield instead of paving straight through it. I recorded a formal, permanent conservation easement on top of the old clause the following spring, just so no future Sterling, mine or anyone else's, ever gets the chance to find some clever way around a promise a stranger made in 1840 and my family kept for 6 generations without knowing it was ever going to matter. The folder Marcus Sterling left on my kitchen table that first morning is still in the drawer. I kept it the same reason my grandmother kept everything. Some things are worth remembering exactly how close they came to being lost. Subscribe for more.